Today I chose not to let anything win, but my drive to get me to the top.
Frank Lee made the beat.
What it do, KTTeeV? This your boy KT, and I'm coming to you live with another podcast episode of the Daily K. Today I have a special guest, Miss Dani Scott, and she is one of my colleagues in the district of A-Leaf, and so I'll let her speak a little bit about herself and introduce herself to the KTTeeV audience.
Hi, I'm Dani Scott. I'm from Savannah, Georgia, and I am a speech language pathologist.
As being in the school speech pathologist, let's back it up a little bit and talk about how you got to that point. And so if you can kind of take us back to like where are you from, or where did you attend college on the road to get into the speech language pathology?
Yes, so I definitely did not know my whole life I wanted to be a speech pathologist. I never really knew what it was. So I went to the illustrious Spelman College located in Atlanta, Georgia. And I double majored in psychology and women's studies. And at that time, most of my college career, I wanted to be a women's counselor. So I thought the women's studies, having that background, and then also psychology, I could be, a clinical psychologist. And I did several internships, but one in particular was at what people call a halfway house. And I was like an intake specialist. And I realized, I connected to the women there, but I realized that the counseling focus was heavy for me because I did not know how to emotionally detach from my clients. And so it was a very heavy experience, and I feel like something that you're called to do should bring you joy and not deplete you. So I felt like perhaps counseling could be an area of something that I did, but not the full focus. So I wanted to kind of expand, and luckily I was doing research in a psychology lab at the time, because I knew I wanted to get my PhD. So I knew that I needed to have some research experience, and we were looking at toddlers and bimanual coordination, which is kind of a random subject, it seems, but bimanual coordination is linked to dyslexia. So we were looking at that in toddlers, and one of the clients, she was not even 2 years old, and she was using like complete sentences, and I was amazed by her, and it kind of made me think a lot about language development and baby language development. And I spoke to her mom, and her mom was a speech pathologist.
Okay.
And so after that, we kind of developed a relationship, and she told me a lot about what she did, and I realized that my interest was more into language development than development, like motor development, which was what I was researching. So my professor kind of supported me on the language development route, and we realized that I did not even want to be a psychologist. And so I kind of just fell into speech pathology at the end of my senior year. Having already started to apply for PhD programs in psychology, I kind of just quit that. Went to Georgia State and took a speech class because Spelman is a liberal arts school, so we don't have like super specific courses. I went to Georgia State, took an intro to speech class, fell in love, realized that's what I wanted to do, and like quickly applied to graduate school.
Wow. Okay. So starting out in Spelman, what year did you go to Spelman?
I went to Spelman. I graduated in 2011.
Wow. Okay, graduated 2011. So now after Spelman, when did you work? You studied in the clinic doing Spelman.
Yes.
Then when you graduated, what did you do next?
Getting into speech pathology programs can be very challenging.
Okay.
The programs, I was an overachiever, still am, and I wanted to get into schools that were in the top 10 in the nation, that were like research driven, because I knew that was just an area of interest for me as far as like doing research, knowing that I still would want to get a PhD in the future. So the programs typically only have about 40 people per year, so it's going to be super challenging to get in. They look at your GRE scores, GPA, and I had like a 3.6, 3.8 or something, but that still wasn't good enough. And so I think I applied to like 5 different schools and I only got into 2. However, the 2 that I got into, I found out like maybe a month before graduation. So me and some of my Spelman sisters, we were like in the cafeteria one day, kind of just crying because we didn't know what we were gonna do and what we were gonna tell our parents. And so one of my friends who was planning to go to medical school, she said that she was going to China to teach English and we should come. And it was a joke. But we actually all end up applying and we all end up getting it.
Yes.
And so then I was like, hey, that's an opportunity to go teach with your friends and, branch out, live abroad and attempt to learn a new language.
Yes.
And so we kind of did it. And then maybe 2 weeks later, I found out I did get into graduate school. So, so my parents were like, so you're not going to go to China? And I was like, I'm still going to go. Okay. So I,
small postponement.
The 2 schools that I got into, only one of them would allow me to defer my admission for a year. The other school would have made me reapply. And I was like, absolutely not. So I ended up going to Indiana University. But I went to China before that for a year to teach English.
Wow.
With my friends.
So I don't want to deter a lot, but we got to talk about the China. So tell us, because I know some people who do like VIP kids. Yeah, and I know some people that are, like I said, about to go there. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about it from the firsthand experience.
Well, just overall, it was an incredible learning experience for a 22-year-old African-American woman to go to live in a place where the culture and language were completely different from everything that I had known. Like growing up in Savannah, I don't even know if I even knew that many Chinese people. So I didn't know anything really before I went. So they kind of quickly immersed you. You went to Beijing, Peking University to learn Chinese for like 4 weeks, which is not enough time to learn anything. So I learned the words I needed, like chicken and, directions and like basics. And then we took a train, I think, and we ended up in Shenzhen, which is a city outside of Hong Kong. So we experienced racism at the very beginning. A lot of the schools were not open to having me and my other African-American female friends teaching because they wanted authentic English speakers as if we weren't. Okay. And so we found a district that hired all of us. And so we all got placed at different schools. So the program, I don't know if this is everywhere, but specifically where we were, you have to live at your school. So we all live like in teacher housing at our school. And it was an area that had a lot of expats, so different people from all over. So we were able to still like find a Mexican restaurant on Taco Tuesday and find an Italian restaurant and like still be able to get around. The racism was challenging, very much so. People, touching you or had never even met a Black person. I even had like my students, there are 50 students probably in a class. So I taught, I don't know, maybe 1,000 kids. And sometimes they would like hold umbrellas over me because they didn't want my skin to get darker, as if my skin is this color because of being in the sun for my life. And so just very like, I think combating ignorance, but knowing that it was from a place of just not knowing. That was it was cute at first and then it got difficult. But the best, so it was challenging. Like I remember crying a lot on my way to work because it was hard. But knowing that experience would have been valuable for me in my career. And then knowing that it was temporary, knowing that I would go back grounded, go right back to graduate school and have all these experiences. And then being with my friends, and we got to travel a lot. I mean, as a 22-year-old, I traveled. I mean, my passport was almost full when I came back.
So now we back. How long did you stay there? 1 year?
Yes, 9 months.
Oh, 1 school year. So you was out.
Whole school year.
Yeah, and then you come on back, grad school.
Yes, grad school.
Okay,
so
and you went to?
Being in China, black girl, then Indiana University.
Okay,
I
okay.
was one of 2 African American women in my program.
Yes.
But I did experience, I wouldn't say I experienced like racism. I think I experienced an opportunity for me to break stereotypes.
Yes. Okay.
And so
awesome.
It was a wonderful experience. Me and the other black girl, we became best friends. We're still best friends to this day. And it was an amazing program. They exposed us to so much. It was challenging. It was very challenging, but I learned a lot. An awesome program.
Okay. All right. So now we come out of Indiana. Do you move back to Georgia?
Yes. So to be a speech pathologist, of course, if you don't have an undergraduate degree in speech, which I didn't, I had a psychology degree. I had to do an extra semester to just take like prerequisites. And then after that, I kind of began the program, but it's kind of pretty integrated. So, for a typical, let's say you went to undergrad and you got your undergrad in like speech and hearing sciences, your program would take 2 years. So mine took 2.5.
Okay, in Indiana.
Yes. And so we also got the opportunity to do our internships anywhere we wanted to. And at the time, my parents went through like some sickness, so I immediately decided to go back home. So I went back to Savannah to do my externships. So you have to work with adults and work with children. You have to work in an educational setting and a medical setting. So during my externships, I worked at a trauma hospital in my hometown in a brain injury unit. That was amazing. And then I worked in my old middle school. And this is without pay, so I needed to live at home. I needed to live at home during that time, and it was challenging being back home and working in places that were so familiar to me, but on another side and place.
Did you have the personal connection, like working at the trauma center as you help people? Like, were you rebuilding?
I did, speech? But it was different because I feel like with counseling, I mean, not saying counseling is not practical, but speech therapy is just so practical. So it was like counseling is a portion. It's like a beautiful mix of counseling, medical, educational, culture, because language and culture are like intertwined. So in that experience, I connected with my clients because I'm like emotionally sensitive, and that helped me. My supervisor, she had been at the hospital for 40 years. And so if you can imagine her age, we were working with primarily people who had strokes. So she was their age.
Rebuilding.
Yes. So she connected to them, but every once in a while we would get someone who got shot in the head, someone who had HIV, someone who got in a motor vehicle accident when they were 19. So she gave me all those people because she had problems connecting with them, and I was able to connect with them. So that kind of benefited me in the hospital setting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fast forward, we through with everything. How did you get to Houston?
So I was working in Atlanta. I went back after Spelman and love Atlanta. It's always going to be home, but I felt like I wasn't challenging myself because I was very comfortable. All my friends were there. My family was very close. It was just too comfortable.
Yes.
And so I knew that I had like a lot of goals that I wanted to accomplish. And I felt like being so close to my family and my friends was detrimental.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's like I told you. My boy called me Thursday. He said, well, man, do you want to come down here and go to school and teach? And he came Tuesday, and like I haven't been back home to stay since. Like that's how fast I like packed up everything. I said, man, I'll be back for my car. I'll be back for everything else. I'm gone. Like just me. Yeah, and then I just had my diploma when I came. I ain't even had no schooling yet. It was to talk about. That's why I'm doing this channel. Yeah, push through some things. Out of all those places you've been, from China to Savannah to Atlanta to now here, Right. Which one of those made you say, you know what, I could be doing something different than this? Did you ever have some of them moments where you like it was easy at mom's house, at my parents' house?
It wasn't easy, but I think it wasn't easy for personal reasons because I was trying to finish graduate school and both of my parents were ill.
Okay.
So, and they're doing great now, but that was like hard to even, to go from 2 years focusing only on myself to go to like, I wouldn't say I was a caretaker, but essentially I took care of my parents. Like I helped them through that difficult time. And it was hard because school was like such a priority. And I think I didn't want to quit. But it was hard seeing my parents in the hospital and working at the hospital at the same time. I felt like I lived at a hospital, and I didn't like that.
Okay, so the move was almost like just getting away from really the toughest place of what you was going through at that time.
And so that's why I was like, I just need to break free. I'm going back to Atlanta where I'm comfortable and where I can have some fun with my friends because I missed that living in Bloomington for those years. And so, but then after like a year of that, I was like, okay, girl, like seriously, come back.
Time to do it.
So
now let's moving on into now we made it to Houston. We are the speech and language pathologists. So now, just explaining to the audience before we get into more of the detail, in a school setting, because I know we talked about it and we always talk about this, our meetings, how the school setting is different from the clinical setting. So if you could just explain a little bit of how the school setting SLPs work.
yeah, so I mean, overall, a speech pathologist is going to be diagnosing and treating, preventing communication disorders. But what I love about a school, other than the fact that I just love being around kids, is that you are going to be treating disorders that directly affect education. So in a clinic, if let's say your parent wanted you to work on something or you scored a certain score on a test, that would qualify you and your insurance would pay for it or you pay out of pocket and you would get this treatment. But to qualify for services in a school, it has to have an educational impact. So it's a beautiful thing for me to know that I'm impacting a child's education directly and I can make my goals directly related to their curriculum versus in a clinic, I'm just not saying you do random things, but it's going to be a different context.
So between the school setting and a clinic, so when we think about clinics, like what do you mean?
I worked in a clinic. I mean, that's a beautiful thing about this career. You can work in a variety of different settings, some at the same time. So I could, schools, you get out at 3:40, then I could go work in a clinic from 4 to 6 every evening.
And it's like a rehabilitation, like for
so
strokes?
It depends. So if you're working with adults, this could be like an outpatient clinic. If you're working with kids, this would just be a private practice. So when I was in Atlanta trying to make extra money to move to Houston, I worked it was a private practice, it's privately owned. And then I actually did home visits. So I saw kids that were 3 years old at their house. I'm going into my 5th year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
As we move forward, let's talk a little bit about parents, because I know me being in an administrative role, parents come to talk a lot about, red flags that they see with their students. From being in special ed and teaching, I would always talk to parents about that. So I will just talk about a few of them. We'll have to go through too deep, but so what are some of the red flags for language problems?
I think it's so important for parents and educators to know that we are communication specialists. So we're not, when we're talking about language, we might not specifically be talking about speaking. There's so much communication that happens before a kid says their first word. So there can be red flags, and a lot of times parents might not even recognize those because they're more focusing on say the first words. But you want to be communicating with your child. I mean, even before your child is born, you know, a baby can recognize their mother's voice. So communication at the very beginning is the goal. So just some red flags as a baby, like not smiling, not giving eye contact, not babbling. So of course they're going to make a few sounds. Sometimes parents think that they're saying da da and mama, but they're babbling. But you know, whatever you think they're saying, that's cool. And then toddlers, like not understanding commands or not understanding what someone is saying, only saying a few words. A lot of people don't know this, but toddlers, like 2 years old, you should have 50 words. Yeah. Okay. So typically developing young child can have a lot of words and use communication in different ways. They can be manipulative. That's like pragmatic skills, social skills. They probably wouldn't be able to add like an S at the end or do things like that. But their vocabulary should really be growing during that time. Okay. Not talking to other children, like not playing with other children, not socializing, not having the desire to do that. Is a red flag. And then just having problems with like early reading and writing, whether that's grasping, not pointing, not using gestures, grasping as far as like holding pencils and crayons, things of that nature. Those are all kind of just developmental red flags.
Okay. So now, after, let's say you went through this list and we got a parent who hears this and says, wow, I've been dealing with that. What are like some quick, I don't know, divots of advice you can give them on what's the next step? Like
so early intervention is key. Like I said, communication is happening from birth, even before they're saying their first words. So if your child is delayed, it is so important to, I know a lot of times it can be challenging. You might not want to face a problem and it might be difficult. Realizing, hey, my child is not the child that I thought they would be at that age. Like, it's okay. And it's so important to get help early on because you don't know, maybe they're a late talker or maybe something more serious is wrong and you would want to get the help as early as possible. So as soon as you notice something, like I said, private clinics, so you could Google and reach out to a private clinic near you, like a pediatric clinic, and that way you would be able to, you know, assess whether your child might need speech as far as like talking to someone specifically, a therapist. A lot of times parents, their first person to talk to is a pediatrician. You know, they're talking to the pediatrician and the pediatrician might say, hey, that sounds like a speech and language delay. And then they might direct you to like a hospital program because speech pathologists also work in hospitals. If your child is in school, then you would need to talk to their teacher because some things some things are developmental because kids develop differently. So it might just be a difference versus like this is a disorder, this is something that is unusual, it's strange for their age. So definitely if they're in school, talk to the teacher first.
Talk to the teacher first. That is an awesome tidbit of information. That is your first line of defense. So make sure to foster that relationship. I hear this. I see that my kid is not speaking. Is there anything that you can talk to the parents about of how to get the kids talking at home? Like what can they do at home?
Yes, and let me just reiterate that other than talking, there are so many things that you can do. A lot of people use sign language to facilitate communication later on. That's a great thing. Also, just using pictures to have your kid request. So if you wanted to make a little placemat with some pictures on it for things that they wanted to pick to eat, that might be something you can do that parents can do on their own. But I'll say reading is an awesome way to facilitate language. I know that parents reading to their children, that's a cultural thing. That's really an American idea. And not every family does that. Not every family values that activity, but it's great for getting children speaking, asking them questions, things of that nature. Even if they're not reading the words, they can just talk about the pictures or label the pictures. Also, those stories with very repetitive structures are helpful. Looking at family pictures and like naming, who is that? And WH questions, who is that? What do they have? Things like that. Also acting things out, like daily activities,
Yes.
Role playing with your child. So just, those are some things. Talking to them.
Yes.
Talking to them, not thinking, okay, well, they'll probably talk to their siblings, but you as a parent, talking to them.
Talk. Okay. So it sounded like the biggest thing on developing language is hearing the language and being immersed in it.
Yes.
And then you take it from there. We want to say preschool. And so then by the time that this child is 3, what should they be doing by the age of 3, by the 3rd birthday?
So a 3-year-old should have a word for almost everything. I mean, and if they didn't have a word, they would make one up. That's common. Or they would, have maybe some problems discriminating. And they would call something what they seen that's similar. So, like a kid that calls a tiger a cat because it's like a cat that they saw. That's like appropriate, right? So they should have words for the things that are in their environment. Maybe not words for things that aren't in their environment. Also, as far as sounds, they should have K's and G's, F's. They would not have an R. They're not going to say that right. They might sound a little British. They might mix some letters up. Instead of saying yellow, they'll say whello. Yeah. That's totally fine. That's so normal. Appropriate. Very appropriate. They might know some preposition words. So like if you said go get something on the table, they would know that on is on top and not under the table. Also, they might know other people should be able to understand your child. I would not say 100% of the time, but more than half. More than half of the time, for sure. And then be able to put at least 3 words together. We kind of look at, 3-year-old, 3 words together, 3-4 words, 4-year-old, 4 or 5 words, at least. So if they are literally still saying 1 word and pointing, that's a red flag. 2 words and pointing, that's a red flag. Using gestures more than words, that's a red flag.
Especially at this age, at 3.
At 3.
Thank you. That's very informative. Very, very good information today. Like I said, I know you talk to a lot of people or a lot of parents, and that this is a popular question. But can children with a disability learn multiple languages?
Absolutely. Okay. A family's decision to teach their child their native language is their decision. And as a communication specialist, I would never tell a parent, if you speak Spanish at home, your kid has a disability, don't try to teach them Spanish. Absolutely not. Language and culture are so intertwined. So to not teach your child their native language, like your family's native language, would affect them culturally and would affect your family. And you just, it's your decision. And there's so much research that shows children with disabilities still being able to access more than one language. I saw a documentary on 2 people with Down syndrome that were getting married, and they both spoke Spanish and English, and they lived in a vocational place. So it's not impossible. I think it is a family's decision. Yes. There are definitely some things you can do to facilitate. So it's okay if you're a parent and you speak Spanish and you don't speak English, and you only speak to your child in Spanish, because they can learn English when they come to school. They can receive support if they need it. As far as learning as a second language, there's so much support out there for students who are exposed to different languages. So you shouldn't keep that away from your child just because they have a disability.
So what are some ways that they can facilitate that language at home or for bilingual?
I mean, my number one, reading. Reading in both languages, exposing them to both languages. But of course, parent, if you don't know English, you don't want to just speak broken English to them, because that's what they're going to learn. And quality and quantity are important. So you don't want to, even your Spanish. So let's say the parent might speak they maybe didn't, graduate from college, and maybe their Spanish or their dialect is, or another language. But if it's not like academic, then you wouldn't expect your child to have academic language in, your native language. They're going to have to learn that. They're going to learn a dialect. And that's okay. So the key is just exposing them as much, but knowing about the difference between quality. And so also music, singing is a great way to kind of initially get them to learn both languages, and then also TV programs, computer, iPad, whatever you want to use, technology that they enjoy.
I like it.
Having some communication partners that speak that language as well, that are their age, would be helpful.
Well, thank you. I think that's a lot of information today, but the good thing is it's on video. So therefore you can go back, because I do believe that you brought a lot of great information for the public, some great questions. And so before we go and wrap up things, is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience, or,
Man. I don't think so.
I do have one more question.
Yeah, okay.
Man, the beginning of the story was awesome. Right now, we 5 years into this awesome part. Are you in school right now?
I am in school right now.
Okay, where are you at?
I'm working on my PhD in psychology, so I kind of did a little loop. Came back at Grand Canyon University. It's an online program, so I am entering my 3rd year in the program.
Okay, so what's next?
I found out that I love supervision, so I love sharing my passion for this field with newcomers.
Okay.
So I definitely want to get into more supervising assistants and people new in the field, and I definitely want to teach at the university level. Who knows? The sky's the limit.
All right. Well, I think that will do it. Thank you again for coming by today.
You're welcome.
Wow, this is going to help somebody. Once again, we got Miss Dani Scott, SLP, and this is KT for KTTeeV, signing off 100.